Albert Einstein was one of the most brilliant men who ever lived, but his letters reveal a shocking personal secret that no one knew about until after he died. Welcome to History Snob. Today we're taking a look at some of the lesser-known secrets about Einstein's life. Even as a baby, Einstein's family had some pretty messed up things to say about him. Both his mother and grandmother thought he looked weird, and that was before the famous hairdo. They both frequently commented on his misshapen head and excessive weight. Perhaps that treatment explains Albert's surprisingly rocky youth. Despite being a brainiac, Einstein was actually removed from school at 15. Not because he was dumb, obviously, but because he hated Germany's strict militaristic rules. This forced him into a drastic decision that would alter the course of his life. At 17, Einstein gave up his German citizenship to go and study in Switzerland. That brings us to a persistent myth about Einstein's life, that he failed math. Einstein did fail his university entrance exam on his first try, but that's because the test was given in French, which he couldn't read. However, he aced the math section. But surprisingly, after leaving university, Einstein actually struggled to find a good job. Unable to find work in academia, he was forced to work in the patent office in the city of Bern. It was while working this kind of menial job that he would come out of nowhere to have the best year in the history of science. In 1905, Einstein had his miracle year. In the span of 12 months, this unknown, underemployed dude published 4 groundbreaking papers that completely changed physics forever. But Einstein also had a sentimental pastime that few knew about. After he became famous, and indeed throughout his life, children often wrote him letters asking the kind of silly questions children ask. Despite being pretty busy, redefining our understanding of the universe, Einstein always took time to pen thoughtful replies to children who wrote to him. There may be a surprising reason why he did this. Einstein struggled to communicate as a child. He really had a hard time with language, and it seems he didn't even start speaking until he was more than 2 years old. Kinda makes those baby Einstein things look a bit stupid, doesn't it? Despite the fact Einstein had left Germany, he went back in 1914, and it turns out that was a big mistake. Einstein went home to accept a professorship at the University of Berlin. However, as the Nazis rose to prominence, they denounced his work because he was Jewish. Einstein began receiving death threats mixed in with his fan mail, but the Nazis would later regret their treatment of Einstein. In fact, it was one of the reasons they lost World War II. Hitler called nuclear physics Jewish physics and refused to believe any of it was true or valid. That's the reason he never came close to getting his hands on a nuke, the one weapon that actually could have made a difference in the war. I guess it sucks to suck. But for Albert Einstein, it sucked living in Germany. The Nazis actually put a price on his head. A high price, $10 million to be exact. Einstein was generally indifferent to death threats, but eventually even he had to flee. In 1932, he and his wife finally left Germany for the US. Shockingly, the Nazis weren't the only ones who were out to get Einstein. The United States government was after him too. The FBI started spying on Albert basically the second he and his wife came to America. They accumulated a huge amount of information about Einstein. When the files finally came out, the world was shocked. When Albert died in 1955, his FBI file was over 1,400 pages long. The paranoid FBI director J. Edgar Hoover hated Einstein's pacifist, secular, and left-wing views, labeling him an extreme radical and possible communist. The contents of Einstein's FBI file are seriously crazy. One note in the file reads, "Are we safe with atomic energy as long as we have men like Einstein on our list? Watch out for him. P.S. Flying saucers are small experiments by Russia for disks 1,000 times larger." Just the thoughts of your average FBI agent in the 1950s. Totally normal. The Bureau claimed Einstein had a secret connection to the Soviet Union and that he was a communist spy. From the file, reference is made to a letter from the Los Angeles office to the director dated April 13, 1949, advising that, redacted, had advised that Albert Einstein Jr., the son of Professor Einstein, was presently in the Soviet Union, and that Mrs. Einstein was afraid that her son in Russia might be held as a hostage to force some particular motion on the part of Professor Einstein. FBI Director Hoover was a little bit obsessed with Einstein, and the Bureau wanted to have the great scientist deported if at all possible. Only one problem. Einstein's son wasn't in the Soviet Union and never had been. He was in South Carolina, which, let me check my notes. Yes, is not a communist state. Oops. Not to worry though. Despite the obvious value of having one of the greatest minds in the world working for your country, the FBI continued hunting for crazier and crazier reasons to persecute frickin' Einstein. The FBI also brought in another world-famous scientist to try and discredit Einstein's theories. You'll never guess who. It was Nikola Tesla. Tesla was a genius, but he was a mad genius. He spent the last years of his life falling in love with a pigeon, claiming his brain cells worked faster than light speed, disputing the existence of the electron, and insisting that atoms could never be divided. Yeah. The FBI got Tesla to say some pretty nutty things about Einstein. Einstein is neither astronomer, mathematician, nor physicist. He is a Confucianist. The Einstein theory is a fallacy, a disgrace to our age. There's one more piece to the FBI's obsession with destroying Einstein for no reason, and don't worry, we've saved their craziest idea for last. Some at the FBI apparently believed that Einstein had helped a bunch of Nazis to construct a death ray. Like, they were just determined to see him as Dr. Strangelove, or maybe Dr. Evil, a communist Nazi Soviet courier/spy/supervillain.
Right.
And what's so weird about the FBI's obsession with Einstein is that the guy did have a dark side. More on that later. But in reality, Einstein's only weapon was his mind. Maybe that's why there was literally a plot to steal his brain. No joke, after Einstein died, his brain was stolen. When Albert died in 1955, Dr. Thomas Stultz Harvey performed the autopsy. And, well, he decided he wanted a memento. He wanted the great man's brain so that he could study its properties and unlock the secrets of universal genius. Instead, possessing Einstein's brain ruined his life and kind of drove him crazy. At first, no one noticed that Dr. Harvey had walked out of the autopsy room with a whole human brain tucked under his sweater like a stolen ham. But before long, the Einstein family found out about what he'd done. Their response was not what you might expect. Dr. Harvey actually made a secret deal with the Einsteins. They would allow him to keep Albert's brain. In exchange, he would promise not to sell it to curiosity seekers and to use it strictly for research purposes. Instead, he did something much weirder. He cut Einstein's brain into 240 pieces, but he wasn't able to gain any special insight into what had made the man so smart. He ended up losing his job, his family, and becoming a kind of wandering weirdo. He spent 40 years drifting from place to place, storing Einstein's brain in leaky cupboards and basements. Sometimes he would give out pieces to people he liked. Merry Christmas. At the age of 80, Dr. Harvey found himself working a menial job and living in an apartment he shared with college students. He was storing Einstein's brain in his closet. At that point, he finally decided to give it back. Today, parts of Einstein's brain are held in museums, although the slices Harvey gifted to friends remain unaccounted for. Although, honestly, I can kind of understand the desire to study Albert's brain, not just because it would be great to find out if there really is something different about the mind of a genius, but also because, as smart as Einstein was, he also made some very questionable choices. You know, like marrying a member of his own family. Yeah, Elsa Einstein, Albert's second wife, was also a blood relative. 2 different ways. Their mothers were sisters, making them maternal first cousins, and their fathers were also first cousins, making them paternal second cousins as well. In 1912, Elsa started hooking up with cousin Albert, who was still married to his first wife. Einstein's first wife was a lady named Mileva Maric, a physicist and mathematician in her own right, which was super rare for a woman at that time. However, Mileva wasn't happy with Albert, partly because of him fooling around with his cousin, understandable, and partly because her husband's work always came first, also understandable. But there was a darker side to Einstein, as his letters make plain. He wrote to his cousin Elsa describing Mileva as uncommonly ugly and noting, "I treat my wife as an employee whom I cannot fire. I have my own bedroom and avoid being alone with her." Fame seems to have changed Einstein for the worse. He became increasingly hostile toward Mileva and even drafted a list of rules she would have to follow if she wanted to stay with him. These included committing herself to wifely duties like washing his clothes and preparing his food, promising to leave him alone whenever he wanted her to, giving up on any hope of emotional or physical intimacy with him, and never criticizing him. Mileva finally left in 1914. Einstein later gave her all the money he received for winning the Nobel Prize, kind of the least he could do, honestly. Albert married cousin Elsa after his divorce was finalized in 1919. Einstein stayed with Elsa until the latter died in 1936, but although he definitely preferred her to Mileva, his treatment of her was not kind. Elsa briefly worked as his secretary, but that was kind of the role she filled in his life throughout. She was responsible for controlling access to her husband and for keeping away people who wanted to waste his time or rip him off. But observers noted that he was often cruel to her, disregarding her feelings as a matter of course. In general, people who knew Einstein felt that he was erratic, prone to impatience and anger. Basically, he wasn't terribly aware of other people's feelings, and he wasn't really interested. And, of course, he cheated on Elsa just as he did on his first wife, engaging in multiple affairs with much younger women. Funny how the FBI wasn't interested in any of that stuff. When we're discussing the most celebrated figures in history, it's important to remember that they were just human beings with frailties and failings like all of us. Being a great scientist doesn't necessarily make you a great husband, but whatever we can say about Einstein's darker side, we do know one thing. He definitely didn't invent a Nazi death ray. If you enjoyed this video, leave us a like and subscribe for more cool historical content. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.